The Raiders 2025 NFL schedule is released. How many primetime games? When is their bye week? How many cold weather games? And more. We got everything you need, all things Raiders schedule. That plus more on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for May 15th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Definitely appreciate you. If you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast, you know we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day because of your consistent support, the way that you show up and show out each and every day. You're checking in on the show. We definitely appreciate that. Not to mention the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day on the YouTube page. Without him, we don't have that page. So big ups to Ari. You can check him out. You can hit him up on Twitter if you want, at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well, at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, as many of you do, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line for you at 707-654-4693. A lot of great feedback, including a lot of great feedback off of what Tuck Rule Fool had to say about the offensive line and are we drinking Kool-Aid. And again, that's a great way to use the voicemail line as well. You have a really good topic that you'd like us to talk about, like Tuck Rule Fool from Colorado did. You could definitely chime in that way as well. You don't always have to respond to something I said. You could just bring something to the table that you think makes a lot of sense and would be some good conversation. That's what he did. We turned it into a topic and a show, basically, not only here on the podcast, but on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio 920 as well. So segment number 3, we'll hear from you. Calls, texts, a lot of great feedback on that call, plus obviously the schedule, how Raider Nation's feeling about what the Raiders have to do, games on the road, games at home, cold weather games, all that good stuff. You'll hear that. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Segment number 2, we'll talk about what I pay attention to when I get the schedule in my hand. How do I feel the Raiders will do after we go over the schedule? What am I looking for? When is the bye week? What stands out to me the most? Break it on down from many different angles. We'll do that in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, news and notes, and really the only news and notes is that the schedule's out, and we'll go through it pretty quickly, let you know all 17 games, all 18 weeks, and let you know when the Raiders bye week is. Now, I will say the one part of the schedule release, because I'm not real huge on the schedule release. Like, it's not something that I got to get the leaks. I got to get the early games. I got to find out. Like, people were hitting me up on Twitter. Oh, Q, here's week 1. Oh, Q, here's week 11. Oh, Q, here's it. Like, I can take it all at one time and I'll be fine, right? I was like, hey, I don't mind. I'll wait till 5 p.m. Pacific time. I'll get it in my hands and then we can dissect it. But it's so funny the way that everyone wants to make sure that they have all the early information and all the leaks, and half the time they're wrong anyway. But whatever the case may be, it's all good. The one thing I'll say about the schedule release that I do like is I do enjoy watching the different teams put out their videos on social media, like the social media team having a lot of fun with it. I thought the Raiders did a pretty good job. I think the Chargers probably knock it out of the park every single year. They did a Minecraft theme this year, and they did it again. They knocked it out of the park. I thought the Raiders was pretty good. It wasn't phenomenal, but it was pretty good. They got a little creative as they put the, schedule release video together. But with that being said, let's just go ahead and jump into the schedule. First of all, the preseason. Not that it matters much. There's no dates. There's no times. But we do know the preseason opponents. They're on the road in Seattle, taking on the Seahawks, which is funny. Pete Carroll was talking about that on SeattleSports.com early on Wednesday. Like, hey, man, what a coincidence that, we get the Seattle Seahawks in the first week of preseason. But this was before that the actual information was out there. So they were saying, hey, Coach, I don't think that's out yet. So it's pretty funny just seeing his reaction on video, and I'm sure he didn't care. It's a preseason game. But they got on the road in Seattle. Then they host the 49ers for week 2 of the preseason. And then they're on the road in Arizona taking on the Cardinals. So those are the first 3 preseason games. Again, no times, no dates on those. Those are TBD. We'll get them at some point. Now, let's get into the regular season. This is what matters. They start off Sunday, September 7th at New England. So there you go. The Patriots, like there's no storylines built in there, right? 10 a.m. kickoff. It's on CBS. Josh McDaniels, former Raiders head coach, is now the offensive coordinator there in Patriots. Mike Vrabel is the head football coach. There's plenty of former Raiders that signed by way of free agency with the Patriots. So they're obviously very familiar. Jacoby Myers used to be a Patriot. He's now with the Raiders. Tom Brady, minority owner of the Raiders, obviously won multiple championships there in New England. So the storylines write themselves. I don't think that there's going to be tough to build that game up to start the season. But the Raiders start out on the road Sunday, September 7th at the New England Patriots. Then they return home Monday Night Football, their first primetime game, September 15th, hosting the LA Chargers. And I'm calling this the oldest rivalry in football, not because the Raiders and the Chargers, but Pete Carroll and head coach Jim Harbaugh. So those two head coaches, they go back to college, USC and Stanford, obviously Seattle and the 49ers, and now the Raiders and the Chargers. So Monday Night Football, 7 p.m. ESPN, primetime Monday Night Football game at home. Little action there on September 15th. Definitely look forward to that. That should be an early test for the Raiders since the Chargers were a playoff team in 2024. Then Sunday, September 21st, they're back on the road taking on Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. That's a 10 a.m. kickoff on Fox. That'll obviously be a challenge, another test for the Raiders since the Commanders were one game away from the Super Bowl. Jaden Daniels' rookie year, so do they take a step back? Do they regress a little bit? Or do they continue to build off the success that Jaden had the rookie year? So Jaden Daniels versus Ashton Genty. That should be a lot of fun, right? That's week 3 at Washington. Week 4, they return home, take on the Chicago Bears. That's Ben Johnson, new head coach there in Chicago. Obviously, the Raiders were trying to land him as their head coach. They didn't get it. So Ben Johnson, rookie head coach against Pete Carroll, the old Wiley veteran. 1:25 p.m. kickoff, Sunday, September 28th at Allegiant Stadium. Then they're on the road October 5th, Indianapolis Colts. That's a Sunday, 10 a.m. kickoff on Fox. Who knows who's going to be the quarterback for the Colts at that point? Anthony Richardson? Is it going to be Daniel Jones? Is it going to be other? Who knows? I think the Colts are one big mystery. Not too sure what's going on with that team, but that's a road game right there in Indy on October 5th. Then the Raiders return home on Sunday, October 12th, taking on Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans. So the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft is going to go up against the number 6 overall pick in Ashton Genty. And a lot of these games are going to be fun to see the best player and the high draft pick from the Raiders, Ashton Genty, going up against these big-time players that I'm talking about. In this case, Cam Ward. We know he'll be the starting quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. That's a 1:05 kickoff at Allegiant Stadium on October 12th. Then they take to the road again, October 19th at Kansas City, 10 a.m. kickoff, Sunday, October 19th. That's the first 7 weeks of the regular season. Then week 8, they have a bye. So you look at that, and I see 4 possible wins in that first 7 games. I absolutely do. Now, obviously, we don't know. Things can go differently, and I could pick out 4 wins, and they could get 4 wins, and they might all be wrong. I might have the wrong 4 wins, but I see 4 wins there. I'll say the Patriots starting things off, the Bears in week 4, the Colts in week 5, and the Titans in week 6. I think they could possibly have a 3-game winning streak. Then they're on the road at Arrowhead Stadium before their bye, going up against Kansas City. Obviously, that'll be a tough one, but it's not one they can't win. I'm just saying I could see 4 wins out of the first 7, and I think if they go into their bye week that way, they're feeling really good about themselves. So coming out of the bye week, Sunday, November 2nd, the Jacksonville Jaguars, a lot of big unknown there. New head coach and Liam Cohen. They've got Travis Hunter. That should be fun to watch at Allegiant Stadium. You know, that's going to be a fun one on November 2nd. Definitely looking forward to that one, being there at the stadium to see the two-way star and Travis Hunter. But then only 4 short days later, Thursday Night Football, another primetime game. They're in Denver, right? 5:15 p.m. prime time. That's at Thursday Night Football, Amazon Prime. So that's a primetime game. So that's 2 already on the season. But 4 days removed from the Jacksonville Jaguars game, you got to go on the road to take on the Denver Broncos. Now, the beauty of that is they have back-to-back primetime games. They go from Thursday Night Football to Monday Night Football. So what does that mean? 11 days from game to game. November 6th is Denver. November 17th, they host the Dallas Cowboys at Allegiant Stadium. Monday Night Football, prime time action, 5:15 kickoff. That's almost like an extra bye. So you have a bye week in week 8, and then coming out of the bye 9, 10, going into week 11. It's almost like you have a built-in bye between weeks 10 and 11. So maybe a couple guys that are banged up have a little bit extra time to get back in time for that big-time showdown. The Cowboys in Allegiant Stadium, Monday, November 17th. Little primetime action. Then they have a back-to-back, their first back-to-back home game where they take on the Cleveland Browns. And matter of fact, that's a game that you look at. Who knows who's going to be the quarterback? Hell, Shedeur Sanders might be the quarterback. He might not be on the roster. Dylan Gabriel might be the quarterback. He might not be on the roster. We know it won't be Deshaun Watson, right? They got so many quarterbacks on the roster right now. Who knows who's going to be out there starting? But back-to-back home games, and that's the first time that the Raiders have that. And funny, I mean, I didn't mention it before the bye week. If you look at the first 7 games, on the road, home, on the road, home, on the road, home, on the road. And then they go on a bye week. So there's no like back-to-back home games, no back-to-back on the road games. Then coming out at home, road, home, home. So that's the first time all the way down to November 23rd, first time that they've had back-to-back either home games or away games. Then Sunday, November 30th, they're in LA, which is almost like a home game as well, even though they don't do well at SoFi Stadium. So it's almost like they have 3 home games in a row with the Cowboys, the Browns, and then they're at LA at SoFi Stadium at the Chargers Sunday, November 30th, and then home again for the Denver Broncos. And I know the Chargers game's not a home game, so don't start yelling and screaming at me and texting in. That's not a home game. They don't win. I get it, but you don't have to go far. You're going from Vegas to LA. That's a quick 3-hour flight at best. Right? Not even that, really. It's not even that. It's not even 3 hours. It's like a 4-hour drive. So it's not really that long, but you get the gist of it. You're not going very far. But Denver at home on December 7th. Of course, that'll be a fun game. Always, you're going to see the Broncos. You're going to see the Chargers. You're going to see the Chiefs at the house. Now it gets a little intriguing. Sunday, December 14th at Philadelphia, 10 a.m. kickoff. Defending Super Bowl champs, Saquon Barkley versus Ashton Genty. Are you kidding me? That's 2 of the best running backs, and depending on how healthy they are and how the seasons have gone, could potentially be 2 of the best running backs in the leagues going mano-a-mano against each other. And you want to talk about a game that'll tell you where the Raiders stand, right? You go into Philadelphia, early kickoff, and you hang with those guys, even come out of there with the W, you got to feel really good about yourself. But that'll be the cold weather game. So far, the only one I've talked about, right? Only cold weather game. So that's not bad. Then they have another one on the road, Sunday, December 21st at H-Town, at the Houston Texans. Obviously, that's indoors, so nothing to worry about when it comes to cold. And then they close out Week 17 and Week 18, back-to-back home games again with the Giants and the Kansas City Chiefs. We don't know the dates, and we don't know the time on either one of those. So not bad. And who knows, that Week 18 against Kansas City, that can mean nothing at that stage of the game, and it could mean everything. Right, since it's a divisional game, it could be the Raiders win that game, they're in the playoffs like it was a couple years ago in 2021 when they took on the Chargers. Or it could be a game where Kansas City's already solidified their spot in the playoffs and who they're going to be, and they're not going to get better, and they might just take the day off. Right, they might not have their starters playing in that one, and maybe that's a victory that the Raiders pick up as well. But looking at the second half, I said 4 wins in the first. I can see 4 wins in the second half as well. I've been as a matter of fact, with 8-9, 8-9 is the first record of Pete Carroll with the Raiders. I think that's fair. I could see 8 wins. I had the call a couple weeks ago about how do you see 8 wins? I see 8 wins. I can see the Jaguars as a W. I can see the Browns as a W. I think they beat the Broncos or the Chargers at least once. And then I look at the Giants, and that's 4 wins right there. So, and again, it just because I'm saying it doesn't mean that those are the games that they're going to win, but there is a real legit path that the Raiders have, 8-9 record their first season. And if they get a couple of games to go their way, maybe even win that last game against the Chiefs, depending on what it means, maybe they're at 9 wins, maybe they're at 10 wins. And if they're at double-digit wins, hell, they could be a playoff team their first year as well. So what is the most important part of the schedule? Like, really want to break it down. What stood out to me the most about the Raiders 2025 NFL schedule? We'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a great sponsor of the show, and that is FanDuel. With the NBA playoffs in full swing, every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. Player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, you name it, they got it. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. You could always check out the biggest moments. You can get fired up about the biggest moments. I always like the player prop bets because that just adds a little bit more intrigue to the game. No matter who you're a fan of, you can always get behind a player for one reason or the other based on the player prop bets. And of course, FanDuel has all of it for you. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If you wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Now that we have the schedule in our hand, the full meal deal, obviously there's so many ways to break it down. There'll be so many opinions on what we all think the overall record's going to be. Again, I didn't shoot too high. I think 8-9 is fair for Pete Carroll in the first year, especially looking at the schedule, the way that it plays out. But what stood out to me the most about the 18-week and 17-game schedule? Well, first of all, 5 out of the first 7 games are AFC conference opponents, and 2 of them are AFC West. What does that mean? Why does that stand out to me? Well, if you want to have an opportunity, again, if you want to have an opportunity to try to push for the playoffs, which obviously they're going to do, you want to stack up what? conference wins. You want to get as many conference wins as possible. Before their bye week, they have 5 games in the AFC conference. So maybe there's a team early on, like looking at the schedule, maybe the Chargers aren't really where they need to be. Maybe the Colts. I already said that that's a game that I look at as a win. Maybe even going into Arrowhead and getting a victory against Kansas City in week 7. Maybe you get some wins there. All of a sudden, not only are you stacking division wins, but you're also getting wins in the AFC conference. So when it all comes down to it, when the math goes into everything and it comes down to tiebreakers and who has the better strength of schedule as far as who can get the wild card spot, the Raiders could sneak in to the playoffs based off how many wins they have in the conference, not just the division. So I always look at conference games immediately. How many do they have early? How much can they capitalize off of it maybe early in the season when a team is not really at their full strength? And I say full strength, like think about last year when they went into Baltimore and won week 2, right? Remember that? That was one of those where Baltimore, they had a tough game in week 1. Week 2, I think they thought they were going to roll the Raiders, and the Raiders found a way to get that W. Now, did it work out the way that the Raiders thought it was, where it was going to build momentum? No, of course not. It didn't. But it could have. They just weren't able to capitalize off of it. So if you look at some of these, right, you feel like, okay, New England, that's an AFC game. Chargers, AFC game. Colts, AFC game. Titans, Chiefs, all those are AFC games. You can really make a little bit of noise early on in the season in the AFC if you can take a couple of those dubs. You remember, a lot of games aren't played, or a lot of players aren't played in the preseason, right? So a lot of times these teams are treating the first 4 weeks of the regular season like the preseason. So maybe there's a chance that the Raiders get a couple dubs that maybe not expected, maybe even just one, right? If you can steal one game here and there, that could be the difference when the season gets wrapped up and you look at the schedule and like, oh, I thought they were going to have 8 wins, but they ended up with 10 because they stole a game here. And maybe that week 18 game didn't mean as much as, you thought it was going to mean. Also, their bye week, that's also something that is very important to me. Where is their bye week, right? They had a year where their bye week came in week 13. That's very late. They've had a year where their bye week came in week 4. That's very early. You want it as close to the middle as possible. Players will tell you that. Had Donald Penn on the show. You heard him on Wednesday's show, and he said that he always looked for the bye week. That was the very first thing as a player that he looked for. So with the bye week coming after week 7 and a road trip to Kansas City, I think that's fantastic. Not to mention, the Chiefs' bye week is not till after week 9. The Chiefs don't lose coming out of their bye week. Andy Reid is phenomenal coming off the bye week. Like, he just does not take L's. So I always look at the Raiders' schedule, and then I always check the Chiefs' schedule to see when their bye week is. And luckily for the Raiders, it's not till after week 9. So they don't have to face the Chiefs coming off the bye. I think that that's great. And then again, you get the Chiefs in Arrowhead week 7. It's not a cold weather game. I mean, I look at this schedule and look for the cold weather games. I see one that really looks like it could be a real deal cold weather game, and that's the Eagles, and that's what, December 14th, right? So that's really the only one I look at, December 14th at Philly as the cold weather game. So that to me is a plus as well. How many primetime games? I mean, many will say the Raiders only had one a year ago when they had Monday Night Football week 15 against the Atlanta Falcons. They took that L at Allegiant Stadium. Some could say that they consider the Black Friday game as a primetime game as well, with it being a standalone game. Or was it a standalone? It was I think it was a standalone. Either way you look at it, some will say it was a primetime game. Others will say it's not. Either way, that if you do consider that a primetime, they only had 2 a year ago. So this year they have 3, 2 Monday Night Football games and then a Thursday Night Football. The Monday Night Football games are both at home. I think that's awesome. You got the Chargers at the house, and you got the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, those are going to be really big games, but to be able to have 3 primetime games showing off Ashton Genty and hopefully showing off a really good team, to me, that's exciting, right? To see as many primetime games as possible is always great. And then the other part of the schedule that really stands out to me, and I mentioned it briefly in segment number 1, Week 18 versus Kansas City. That game could be a huge stage. It really can. And remember, this is not a game that has a date. It doesn't have a time yet. Remember when they played the Chargers back in 2021, Week 18? That was the last game. It was Sunday Night Football, last game of the season. All eyes were on Allegiant Stadium because that was one of those 2 teams was going to get into the playoffs. Even if they tied, both teams were going to get into the playoffs. The Raiders obviously win that game, and they punched their ticket to the playoffs. Obviously, that was a wild year where Rich Bisaccia took over for John Gruden. That was big because all eyes were on the Raiders, and that ended up being a primetime game as well because it's Sunday Night Football. that could end up being the stage, right? I've been saying it for a while. I think that the Chiefs are going to take a step back in 2025. I don't think they're going to be able to win as many one-score games as they did. I don't think that they're going to be as healthy. Not that I'm rooting for injury, but reality is it's a numbers game, and normally if you have a really healthy season, you regress a little bit the next year. It's just a reality of the game. That's just how it goes. So I think that they take a step back. I think obviously the Raiders take a step up with having Pete Carroll in place and, football people making football decisions and smart football being played by the team. And so that game could mean everything. It also could be in a situation where the Chiefs are in the playoffs, but they don't have anything else to gain. They don't have any moves that, any room to grow. They can't increase their seeding in the playoffs, right? Maybe they've already won the division. Maybe someone else has won the division. I don't know. But that could be a game where they sit their players, and then the Raiders have one more home game and have a chance to notch one more victory, whether that's victory number 8, victory number 9 on the season, whatever. Maybe it's even a chance for the Raiders to make the playoffs and the Chiefs can make the playoffs. And then at that point, I'm sure the Chiefs would play their starters because they don't want to allow the Raiders just to walk into the playoffs. But there's so many different elements that are in play in that Week 18 game. It could mean all or it could mean nothing, right? So to me, that's intriguing just to know that it's at the end of the season and it's at home. And oh, by the way, the other caveat to this that makes it so important for the Raiders haven't beat the Chiefs in Allegiant Stadium. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs walk into Allegiant Stadium and they pencil it in red. No, they don't pencil it. They write it in an ink pen, in magic marker, whatever the case may be, with permanent ink. Let's put it like that. They let it be known that that's a dub in red, right? Because they don't feel like the Raiders could beat them in Allegiant Stadium. Even the Super Bowl that was played in Allegiant Stadium, the Chiefs won. They haven't lost in Allegiant. They feel like that's their West Coast home, and the Raiders have got to stop that. They've got to stop allowing that to happen. So you get the game at the house. Raider Nation gets to see their team maybe one more time. Maybe they're punching their ticket to the playoffs. They get to see them more, but they have an opportunity to be lathered up, have Allegiant Stadium loud and proud, and, the Raiders can go and win that game against the Chiefs and make a statement either going into the offseason or going into the playoffs. Either way, it'd be awesome. If you remember back to John Gruden, the first time that he was coaching the Raiders, 1.0 version of John Gruden, when they ended the season in Kansas City, and he wasn't having a really good year the first year. And I actually thought, oh, man, he's going to get fired if he doesn't, do well. And he won that last game in Kansas City. I believe that was his first year with the team. If it wasn't the first year, it was the second year. But they had a hell of a game. It ended up going to overtime. They won that game. And I know the Raiders didn't go to the playoffs that year, but that kind of gave them a trajectory of where they were going in the right direction and stopped that dominance that Kansas City was having over the silver and black. So that could also be, a jumping off point and a great way to launch yourself into the offseason if, in fact, they don't have a season where they're going to qualify for postseason action. But that should be fun to be able to have the end of the season, the end of the regular season against the Kansas City Chiefs at your house. So that's really what stood out to me about the schedule. It doesn't look like it's a gauntlet. It's not like you got to, travel far and you got multiple, like 3 or 4 away games in a row. It's not that. I feel like it's pretty even. I'd like to see at some point the Raiders actually open up the season at home. They don't do that. They don't get to home till the second week of the season. They haven't had a home game to start the season since 2021 when they opened up the Baltimore Ravens, and that was the first time that fans were allowed in the stadium. So I'd like to see them actually get a home game to start the season off with one of these years. It's been a handful of years since they've got that. But to me, the schedule is very reasonable. It's very reasonable. It's not one of those you look at and say, oh, the NFL hates the Raiders, right? What was that one year where they had like 3 or 4 away games, including a trip to London or something like that? Like they were away from Allegiant Stadium for like a whole month, maybe even longer than that. Like that's ridiculous. This, at least they're not on the road long time. Right? The only time that they have back-to-back road games is week 18, 17, 15, week 15 and 16 when they're at Philadelphia and at Houston. That's the only time they have back-to-back away games, and then the only time that they have, and then twice they have back-to-back home games. The Cowboys, Monday Night Football, and then the Browns following that, and then the last 2 games of the season where they host the Giants and they host the Chiefs. So I think all in all, the NFL did not do the Raiders dirty, as many times people will say. I think it's a very reasonable schedule, one that's very, you can manage it. I think Pete Carroll and company will definitely be able to manage it with no problem. There should be no games where they have to, stay on the East Coast or whatever. You know what I mean? They don't have to stay in Philadelphia to get ready for Houston. They don't have to do that, right? And they don't have to worry about leaving East Coast game and going overseas. They don't have any of those either. So, again, I think that the schedule makers could have been a lot more harsh on the silver and black, only having the one game that's in the cold weather. I feel like that's an advantage for the Raiders. They're pretty much on even playing field, and they got a lot that are indoors. And I don't know if you know, but Geno Smith does really well when it comes to indoor games, right? They have a lot of indoor games, right? Obviously, all the ones at home, those are 9 right there. And then Houston, that's indoors. The Chargers, that's indoors. Let's see, what else do you have? You have the Colts, that's indoors, right? So you got what, 12 games right there, 12 out of 17 that are indoors. I mean, that's, to me, I think that you're looking pretty good in that scenario. So, of course, we'd love to hear from you what your thoughts are on the 2025 NFL schedule. How do you think that the schedule makers did it for the Raiders? How do you think the Raiders manage and navigate through their 2025 schedule? Of course, we'd love to hear from you at 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider Podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts. We'll close out the show next. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts as we close out the show. 707-654-4693. Went a little long there in segment number 2, so we'll only have a couple calls and a couple texts here in segment number 3. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's start off with Derek from the 203, calling to talk about the call from Tuck Rule Fool about drinking the Kool-Aid when it comes to the Raiders' offensive line. Here's Derek from the 203.
Hey, Q. Derek calling from the 203. Regarding the call about if we're drinking the Kool-Aid or not. And I will kind of, walk the middle ground here. I'm sipping the Kool-Aid. I'm not drinking it. I'm not chugging it. Right? But I'm sipping it. I'm tasting it. I'm feeling it out. Do I want to start drinking it? I don't know yet. But I'll give it a taste. I think I'm very cautiously optimistic with the offensive line. And the reason for that is because the people in place who have been doing it a long time feel very confident in it. I think one of the big differences between their confidence in the O-line and Antonio Pierce's regime, if you will, and Zamir White, is that they had some ingrained bias because they saw Zamir step up and they saw Zamir perform. And not just like on tape, but in the locker room. And they saw, I'm assuming the effect that he put out on his teammates, with how he was approaching, that role. If you remember, with the videos in the weight room, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it, I think is what he was saying. Zamir White last year. So they saw that in a way that, the bias that they had, because it was like, I know that they didn't draft him, but it was kind of like their guy. I think that plays into it a lot. Whereas this regime, they don't have that bias. They weren't here last year when the O-line started to improve. All they have is the tape, right? So that's kind of what pushes some optimism for me, is that I don't think that this regime has the bias of the offensive line that the previous regime had for the running game. So that's why I'm kind of sipping it. Trying to trust the adults that are in the room, right? We've been talking about that all off season. It feels like there's adults in the room, so I do want to trust that. But recognizing, the O-line took a minute to really gel and start to perform. And the other thing with this offensive line that I really like, and this I'm drinking the Kool-Aid on, is the youth of the O-line, right? Outside of Kappa and Colton Miller, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the guys are under 26, 27. Even Wagner, who's been hurt the first couple of years in the league, he's super young. So the line is super, super young. There's a lot of room for development, and there's a lot of room for longevity when you have that. It's how I like to build my Madden franchises. I draft multiple linemen every year, so I have the young guys coming in and rotating in and out. So I think that the youth and the less bias are two things that make me go from maybe sipping the Kool-Aid to drinking the Kool-Aid.
Derek, thanks so much for the call and the cautious optimism. I can appreciate that. I like the way that you mentioned the bias of what AP and his staff saw in Zamir White and the guys that were in place on the offensive line, right? The fact that this staff doesn't have that bias. They all acquired everybody that's on the staff. There's not somebody that these guys are all their guys. They had them brought in for a couple years, and these guys have to fit. They have no allegiance to them. So I do like that. And if they feel pretty confident that, okay, it's not the players, it's the coaches, and we can get this right, I think that they deserve the benefit of the doubt, again, because they've been there, done that. At least the guys that are in charge, the main guys, they've been there, done that. They know what they're looking for. So, I think cautious optimism is a good way of putting it. And you always have the right to change your mind after we see how it all plays out. And what does the health of the offensive line look like going into the regular season? Obviously, that's going to play a big role as well. But, Derek, thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Got a quick text from Jeffrey in El Paso. Q, exciting day for the schedule release. I think the videos the Raiders posted was pure pettiness, and you know that I'm here for it. I'll be at that Monday Night Football game against the Cowboys. Appreciate everything you do for the Raider Nation. That's Jeffrey from El Paso. There you go. He loves the social media videos, all petty, that the Raiders put out, and he said he's King Petty. He's ready for being Mr. Petty, and he'll be at that Monday Night Football game against the Dallas Cowboys. I know it's really well in advance, but if you get there early, man, make sure you come to the Torch right there in Allegiant Stadium on the Coors Light Landing. Definitely be there, man. Love to chop it up with you. So, Jeffrey, thanks so much for the text. Appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Paul the Barber out to 661, calling to talk about the way that things have been playing out with the Raiders under GM John Spytek, head coach Pete Carroll, and as opposed to previous years that the Silver and Black have had. Here he is, Paul the Barber.
Yo, Q, what's up, man? This is Paul the Barber calling in. It's been a while since I called in, man, but just wanted to touch back with you, man. Been locked in on the past couple episodes here and there. Just want to catch up with everything, man, and, just from what it sounds, man, piggybacking on the draft and everything you've been talking about with rookie mini camp and all the off-season stuff, it sounds great, man. It sounds really good so far. To me, and I hope this isn't a lazy take, but to me, it just feels like football again, man. Like the Raiders are just back to focusing on football. And what I mean by that is going back the past 3-4 years, we just had a lot of concerning questions in the off season, the past few years. Last year with, is Antonio Pierce the right coach? Is he the right man for the job? Given his lack of experience, is Devontae Adams going to leave? Is he happy? Is he going to get enough targets? Is Gardner Minshew a legit starting caliber quarterback? All those questions, man, even before with Josh McDaniels, the question was, is it going to be different his second time around? Derek Carr, is he going to stay? Is he going to leave? There was just it always felt like just something. It was related to football, but it always just felt like something was just off, man, and there was just too many concerning questions, And even with the offensive coordinator last year with, my mind went blank, with Chicago Bears offensive coordinator. My mind went blank. But anyway, there were just a lot of concerning questions going into each off season the last few years, man. And just this year, it just feels right, man. It feels like, I'm not saying we're going to have the perfect season, but it just feels like just football. The Raiders are just able to focus on just football. We got our guys locked in, our core guys, Geno, Max Crosby, Genty, Bowers, Christian Wilkins, all these guys, man. They're just set in. They got their contracts done. They're ready to go. They're healthy. And let's just focus on football, man. And that's what feels good, We got our guys. We got our coach. We got our coordinators. And, Tom Brady's on board, which I'm glad. So, I don't know, Q, that's just the vibe I'm getting from this season, man, and I'm hoping obviously for a successful season. But a lot of high hopes this year for me, man, a lot of Raider fans. And like I said, it just feels like football again. And, man, so go Raiders, just win. Take it one day at a time. I know it's only May, but, man, I can't wait till opening kickoff, man. Have a good one, Q. Go Raiders.
Paul, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it. I like that take. And no, it's not lazy at all. It's absolutely fair. It feels like it is all about football, right? It's not a lot of sideshow stuff going on. It's a football mentality. It's guys that love football, that are ready to compete at football. And there's not a lot of the sideshow. It's not a lot of the who's going to be the quarterback, who's going to do this, that, and the other, right? Is this player going to want to be there, past the trade deadline, like you mentioned with Devontae? There's a lot, and we've talked about that before. There's so much unknown in previous years, and this year that feels like it could strictly be about football, and that's a good thing. When you can focus in on just football and not all the side dishes, just get the steak, get the bone-in ribeye, and don't have to worry about all the side dishes, then you're good to go. Paul, really good call, man. Thanks so much. It's great to hear from you. Up next, got a real lengthy text here from King Raider. He's the son of Good Doc. He says, hey, Q, King Raider back with some thoughts on the 2025 Raiders schedule. I'm predicting a 10-7 season. That might sound a little bit optimistic, but here's how I see it playing out. We'll go through this pretty quickly. Week 1, a W versus the Patriots. Week 2, a W versus the Chargers. Week 3, a loss for the Commanders. And Week 4, a win versus the Bears. Week 5, a win versus the Colts. Week 6, a win versus the Titans. And then Week 7, a loss versus the Chiefs. So you have win, 2, 3. You have 5-2 in the first 7 games. All right, coming out of the bye, Week 9, win versus the Jaguars. We said Travis Hunter might be a problem, but I like our chances. Loss for the Broncos. Week 11, a loss versus the Cowboys. Week 12, a win versus the Browns. Week 13, a loss versus the Chargers. Week 14, a win against the Broncos. Week 15, a loss versus the Eagles. Week 16, a loss versus the Texans. 17, a win versus the Giants. 18, a win versus Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. He said that gets us to 10-7 and just squeezing into the playoffs. The schedule's got a solid flow, early momentum, a bye week right before a tough stretch, and a winnable final run that can get us over the line. That Week 18 matchup might decide everything. And honestly, I think a big part of how far we go will come down to Ashton Jeanty and Jack Besh. Jeanty adds real explosiveness to the backfield, and Besh gives us a reliable target across the middle. If those two get going with the rest of this offense, they could do some real damage. King out. There you go. Just like that. 10-7 from King Raider. He's the son of the Good Doc, giving us his thoughts on the 2025 schedule. Thanks so much for that. I do appreciate you. We'll close out with a call from 305 Key. He's calling to respond to Tuck Rule Fool's call about drinking the Kool-Aid about the Raiders offensive line. Here he is, 305 Key.
Hey, Q. It's 305 Key from the bottom again. Calling to respond to Tuck Rule Fool's comment. I just finished listening to the show. Oh yeah, and it is one band, one sound. Just to say, yeah, you got it right. I feel him. Like, are we drinking the Kool-Aid, right? I think that's the whole mindset or mentality of a lot of Raider Nation. We're concerned about whether or not the right decisions are made because we got PTSD from prior seasons. But I think that question, well, I'll put it like this. That question for the coaching staff might have been answered already. And that was one of the big things I had going into the draft, like were we going to draft an O-line early, right? Or were we going to pick somebody up in the middle rounds? And we picked somebody up in the middle rounds, which means I think this staff has confidence in our current O-line. So are we going to give them the benefit of the doubt? Are we going to trust them? Things of that nature. But I also think that in past regimes, a lot of the coaches took criticism for poor O-line play. Right call, right play, one person gets beat, it blows the whole play up TFL, and everybody's mad at the coach. But if you look at the one person, they missed the block. So I think that this staff in the offseason, as they came in, I think they reviewed film. I think they reviewed scheme. They may have made the decision that the scheme might have been the problem, or maybe the running back was the problem. We know Zeus missed a lot of holes. He made a lot of poor reads. So I do think I'll be cautiously optimistic, but we won't know until we actually see some real games played. So I think it's a valid question and a valid concern, but I do think, if we're going to trust this new staff and trust this regime, I think, at least I hope they made the right decision. So that's all I got. Appreciate you, as always, and let's go get them. I'm out here. Raiders!
305 Key, Mr. 305, definitely appreciate you, man. Thanks for the call. Appreciate the, the confirmation on the one band, one sound, too. I don't know why I always mess those things up, right? It's in my head. It sounds great. And then when I say it, I'm like, man, I don't know. That didn't really sound right. But that one did sound right. I'm glad that you gave me that confirmation. Your boy needed that. Giving credit to the coaching staff, not because of what they've done on the field, but the film study, right? Players' responsibility as opposed to the coaches. They need to go out there and they need to make plays. So again, more cautious optimism when it comes to the Raiders offensive line. Obviously, we'll see how it plays out, but clearly Tuck Rule Fool had a good conversation and a good topic to talk about. We'll continue to talk about that and more here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So thanks so much for that call. Definitely appreciate you. And that's going to do it for today's show. Obviously, we'll have many more angles to talk about when it comes to the schedule. We'll have much more to talk about when it comes to the offensive line, more subjects, a lot of good stuff coming this way here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So we'll close out the week really strong. We'll do that tomorrow. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.